Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're diving into a book that's been causing a stir for centuries. Niccolo Machiavelli's The Prince.
Oh, yeah, The Prince.
You might be thinking,
Yeah.
a 16th century political guide. What's that got to do with me?
Right.
But trust me,
Yeah.
this little book is packed with insights that are surprisingly relevant
Oh, absolutely.
to modern life, whether you're, aiming for that student council position or just trying to figure out how the world works.
It's really about understanding power dynamics, isn't it?
Yeah.
And what's fascinating is that Machiavelli was writing during a time of intense political turmoil in Italy. It was like a real-life Game of Thrones,
Okay.
with rival cities and families constantly vying for power.
So picture Italy as this chaotic playground
Yeah.
with everyone scrambling for the best swing set.
Exactly.
Where does Machiavelli fit into all of this?
He was a Florentine diplomat, right in the thick of it. But when the Medici family seized power, he was ousted from his position. Some scholars believe he wrote The Prince as a way to get back in their good graces.
So he's basically handing a guide on how to seize and maintain power to the very people who kicked him out.
It's a bold move, isn't it?
That's a bold move.
And it gets right to the heart of what The Prince is all about, understanding the mechanics of power. This leads us to Machiavelli's most infamous line. It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both.
Whoa. That's pretty intense. Is he really saying it's better to be a ruthless dictator?
Well, not quite. What's important here is that Machiavelli was a pragmatist.
Okay.
He believed a ruler's main job is to maintain stability and order, even if it means making tough, unpopular decisions. He argues that a ruler who's too worried about being liked might hesitate to take action when it's needed.
So it's less about being a tyrant and more about making those hard calls for the greater good, even if it means ruffling some feathers.
Exactly. To illustrate this point, Machiavelli points to figures like Caesar Borgia.
Okay.
He was ruthless, yes, but also effective in unifying a chaotic region of Italy.
I'm starting to see the picture here. It's about being decisive,
Yes.
like a lion pouncing on its prey,
Yeah.
but also cunning and adaptable, like a fox outsmarting its opponents.
That's a great way to put it. Machiavelli believed a ruler needs both strength and shrewdness to navigate the tricky world of politics. He even suggests that a prince shouldn't shy away from breaking promises if it's necessary for the good of the state.
Hold on. Breaking promises. Isn't that a major red flag, especially for someone in a leadership position?
You'd think so, right?
Uh-huh.
But Machiavelli argues that clinging rigidly to moral ideals in the cutthroat arena of politics can be a ruler's downfall. He believed that sometimes a leader has to prioritize the well-being of the state above all else, even if it means bending the rules.
So it's a bit like the ends justify the means, achieving a greater good, even if it requires some morally ambiguous actions.
That's a simplification, but it gets at the core of Machiavelli's argument. He was writing during a time when Italy was deeply divided and vulnerable to foreign powers. He longed for a strong leader who could unite the Italian peninsula and free it from foreign control.
So maybe The Prince wasn't intended as a tyrant's handbook, but as a blueprint for a better future for Italy.
That's one way to interpret it. And that's what makes The Prince so fascinating. It's open to multiple interpretations.
Right.
Was Machiavelli describing the reality of power? Or was he prescribing a set of rules?
Right.
Or perhaps a bit of both?
I know, my head is spinning.
It's a lot to unpack.
So we've talked about Machiavelli's background and his infamous fear versus love quote.
Great.
But what are some other eyebrow-raising pieces of advice he dishes out in The Prince?
Well, one that might surprise you is his take on generosity.
Okay.
You'd think being generous would be a good thing for a leader.
Right. What could possibly be wrong with being generous?
Machiavelli argues that excessive generosity can actually be detrimental to a ruler. It can drain the state's resources, leading to financial instability. He even suggests that it's better for a ruler to be perceived as a bit stingy.
Wait, so it's better to be seen as a Scrooge than risk going bankrupt by being too giving?
That's Machiavelli's perspective.
Wow.
He was all about thinking long-term, ensuring the state's stability even if it meant appearing less magnanimous.
It's all about playing the long game, huh? What else does Machiavelli have in store for us?
Let's talk about fortifications. Machiavelli actually advises against heavily fortifying a city.
Really? Wouldn't strong walls and defenses make a city safer?
You'd think so, right?
Harder to conquer.
But Machiavelli argues that if a ruler has the genuine support of their people, elaborate fortifications are unnecessary.
Okay.
He believed that a loyal populace would defend their city with fierce determination, rendering massive walls less important. But if a ruler faces dissent and has to rely solely on walls for protection, the city becomes vulnerable.
So it's about having a strong foundation of trust and loyalty between the ruler and the people. That makes a lot of sense.
Exactly. Machiavelli believed that a ruler's true strength ultimately comes from the support of their people.
It seems like Machiavelli is really emphasizing the human element of leadership, that connection between the ruler and the people.
Absolutely. And that brings us to another fascinating aspect of The Prince, the role of fortune. Machiavelli compares fortune to a raging river, unpredictable and often destructive. He even says, "Fortune is a woman, and if you wish to keep her under, it is necessary to beat and ill-use her."
Wow, that's a pretty harsh analogy. Does he mean we're all just helpless victims of fate?
Well, not exactly. While Machiavelli acknowledges the power of fortune, those unexpected twists and turns of life, he also believes that wise leaders can take steps to mitigate its impact.
So it's not about just letting fate toss us around like a boat in a storm. We can actually do something about it.
Exactly. He uses the analogy of building defenses and barriers to control the flood. He suggests that fortune favors the bold, those who seize opportunities and take calculated risks.
So it's like fortune is this wild river, and we're frantically building dams and levees,
Yeah.
trying to direct the flow as best we can.
That's a great way to visualize it. We can't completely control fortune, but we can prepare for it, adapt to it, and even use it to our advantage.
Okay, so it's not just about being reactive, but proactive, anticipating challenges and planning ahead.
Precisely. And that leads us to another crucial aspect of Machiavelli's thinking, understanding human nature. He believed that anyone in a position of power needs to be a keen observer of people, their motivations, their weaknesses, and their desires.
That makes sense. After all, how can you lead effectively if you don't understand what makes people tick?
Exactly. And Machiavelli wasn't afraid to highlight the less than noble aspects of human nature. He acknowledged that people can be fickle, self-interested, and easily swayed by appearances.
That's a bit cynical, isn't it? Does he believe there's no such thing as genuine loyalty or altruism?
He was definitely a realist. He believed that, while there may be exceptions, a ruler should never assume unwavering loyalty from anyone.
So it's about being cautious, not naive, understanding that power dynamics can shift quickly and unexpectedly. Kind of like how Machiavelli himself got kicked out of his position when the Medici came back into power.
Exactly. His own experiences likely shaped his view of human nature. He learned the hard way that power can be fleeting, and that relying solely on the goodwill of others is a risky strategy.
I see what you mean. It's a good reminder for all of us, not just those in leadership positions. Blind trust can backfire.
And this brings us to another interesting point, Machiavelli's emphasis on the importance of image. He believed that appearances matter greatly in politics, that a ruler needs to project an image of strength, competence, and even virtue, even if those qualities aren't always present behind closed doors.
So it's about putting on a show, projecting the image you want others to see, even if it's not the whole truth.
In a sense, yes. Machiavelli understood the power of perception and believed that a ruler needs to carefully craft their public image to inspire confidence and maintain control. He even suggests that a ruler should appear to be religious, even if they're not particularly devout.
Wow, that's taking image management to a whole new level.
Right.
But I can see his point. Public perception can make or break a leader, even today.
Absolutely. Think about it. A leader's reputation, whether it's deserved or not, can have a huge impact on their ability to influence others.
It's making me think about all those leadership books that talk about being authentic and transparent. Machiavelli seems to be suggesting a very different approach.
He does. And this is one of the most debated aspects of The Prince. Does Machiavelli believe that a ruler should actually be virtuous or just appear to be? It's a question that still sparks debate and contributes to the image of Machiavelli as someone who advocated for a manipulative and even a moral approach to leadership.
It's amazing how a book written hundreds of years ago can still provoke such strong reactions.
That's the power of a truly enduring work. Yeah.
The Prince makes us confront uncomfortable truths about power, about human nature, and about the often blurry lines between what's right and what's effective. So we've got fortune, human nature, and image management. What other thought-provoking, maybe even controversial ideas does Machiavelli explore in The Prince?
Well, one that's still very relevant today is his take on the use of mercenaries versus citizen armies.
Okay.
Machiavelli was deeply suspicious of mercenary soldiers. He argued that their loyalty was for sale, which made them unreliable in a real crisis.
So we're back to that idea of trust or the lack thereof.
Yeah,
He thought it was dangerous to rely on outsiders for protection, especially if their only motivation was money.
exactly. Machiavelli believed that a ruler's true strength lay in a well-trained and loyal citizen army people who were invested in the well-being of their own state. He wrote, I say, therefore, that the arms with which a prince defends his state are either his own, or they are mercenaries, auxiliaries, or mixed. Mercenaries and auxiliaries are useless and dangerous.
That makes a lot of sense. If your soldiers are also your citizens, they're going to fight with a lot more heart defending their homes and families, rather than just collecting a paycheck. Think about the American Revolution.
Exactly. It's a powerful example of what Machiavelli was talking about. He believed a citizen army, even if they weren't as skilled as professional soldiers, would be more reliable in the long run.
So it's about building a sense of shared purpose and loyalty among your people. That's a great lesson for any leader, whether you're running a country or managing a team.
Absolutely. And that brings us to another fascinating aspect of The Prince, Machiavelli's thoughts on the relationship between a ruler and their advisors. He believed that a wise ruler should surround themselves with capable and honest advisors, but also warned against becoming too reliant on their counsel.
So it's a bit of a balancing act, seeking advice,
Yeah.
but ultimately making your own decisions.
Yeah.
Kind of like how we're navigating this deep dive into The Prince together.
Exactly. We're gathering information and exploring different perspectives, but ultimately it's up to each of us to form our own opinions and interpretations. And you know what? Machiavelli would probably applaud that independent thinking.
He seems like a big fan of questioning everything and thinking for yourself.
He is, and that's what makes The Prince so relevant and thought-provoking, even centuries after it was written. It challenges us to look beyond the surface, to grapple with complex ideas, and to arrive at our own conclusions.
This deep dive has been a whirlwind of ideas.
Hmm.
We've covered so much ground. Machiavelli's life, his controversial advice, the historical context of The Prince, and even some practical takeaways for us non-princes navigating our own lives.
And we've barely stretched the surface. The Prince is a book that rewards multiple readings, with new layers of meaning to uncover each time.
So before we wrap things up, any final provocative thought you want to leave our listeners with as they continue their own exploration of Machiavelli's The Prince?
Here's something to consider. Remember how Machiavelli dedicated The Prince to Lorenzo de' Medici, the very person who had him removed from his position? Was this a genuine attempt to regain favor, or could there be a deeper, maybe even subversive message hidden within the pages of this book? Was he subtly critiquing the very style of leadership he seemed to be advocating?
Whoa, that's a mind bender. It's like he's leaving us with a puzzle to solve, challenging us to think critically about his true intentions.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of The Prince. It keeps us thinking, keeps us questioning, and keeps us engaged in a dialogue that spanned centuries.
Well said. It seems like the deep dive into The Prince never really ends. There's always more to discover, more to debate, and more to learn. It's like Machiavelli is saying, don't just take my word for it, think for yourselves.
Exactly. That encouragement to think critically and independently is what makes The Prince so powerful, even all these centuries later.
You know, when I first heard we were doing a deep dive on The Prince, I thought it was going to be all about cutthroat politics and power grabs. But it's so much more than that.
Oh, yeah.
It's about human nature,
Yeah.
strategy, leadership. It's really relevant to anyone, no matter what they're striving for.
I completely agree. Whether you're aiming for that promotion, trying to lead a team project, or even just navigating friendships and relationships, The Prince has something to offer.
Okay, so let's bring it back to our listener. We've covered a ton of ground today, but what are some key takeaways they can apply to their own lives?
One of the biggest things I hope they walk away with is the importance of adaptability. Just like a ruler has to adjust their strategies to changing circumstances, we all need to be flexible and willing to pivot when things don't go as planned. Think about Machiavelli himself. He was ousted from his position, but he adapted. He wrote The Prince. He tried to work the system.
That's a great point. It's not about being rigid or stuck in your ways. It's about being able to read the situation and make adjustments as needed.
Exactly. Another key takeaway is the importance of strategic thinking. Machiavelli emphasized the need to think ahead, anticipate challenges, and plan accordingly. That applies to everything from acing that test to achieving your long-term goals.
So it's not just about reacting to what's happening right now, but thinking about the bigger picture and planning your moves carefully.
Right, and let's not forget Machiavelli's emphasis on building strong relationships. Just like a ruler needs the support of their people, We all need to cultivate strong networks of support in our personal and professional lives. Those are the people who will have your back when things get tough.
It's like building your own personal court, a group of trusted advisors and allies who can offer guidance and support.
Exactly. And remember, even though Machiavelli is often seen as cynical, he did believe in the power of the people. He argued that a ruler's true strength comes from the loyalty of their subjects. So build those strong connections, nurture those relationships, and surround yourself with people who believe in you.
This has been an amazing deep dive into the Prince. It's definitely challenged my own assumptions about Machiavelli and his work. I hope our listener feels the same way.
Me too. And I hope they'll continue to explore Machiavelli's ideas on their own. The Prince is a book that rewards multiple readings, and each time you're likely to uncover something new.
So true. And who knows, maybe you'll even find yourself applying some of Machiavelli's wisdom to your own life in a way that feels right for you, of course.
Absolutely. The most important thing is to think critically, question everything, and never stop learning.
Thanks for joining us on this incredible journey through Machiavelli's world. Until next time, stay curious.